What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Wet Boots Podcast. My name is Leo, and this is a show where I talk to people who are or have been in the military, and I get a chance to hear their story. My guest today is totally invited to the Carnita Asada. He's a ranger, a father, and a leader who understands servant leadership. Please welcome my guest today, servant of leaders, John Howell, everybody.
Hey,
Hell
man.
yeah.
Appreciate you bringing me on. This is awesome.
Dude, thanks for coming on, man, because impact on social media, and it's absolutely wild. And your content is always super funny. It's always very ironic. It's always very ironic, dude. But it's something that it's like it's refreshing to see because it's coming from a major. And you're like, what? Once you see that rank, you're like, at first I saw that and I was like, this guy is not a major for sure.
Stolen
And then
valor. Stolen valor.
he's just stolen valor, man. And then I just kept following your content. I'm like, God damn, this guy's fucking funny, man. But yeah, I'm just gonna let you give you a chance to introduce yourself. John Howell, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm on my lunch break. I'm a drill weekend over here in the great state of Washington. Currently serving Washington Army National Guard. I've been here for about, almost 3 years. I've enjoyed it. I've loved it. Did 9 years on active duty prior. I've always been pretty lucky. I'd say I've always worked for good people, been in good units. And it's this social media thing. It's only been going for about a year, and I never really I never thought I would be that kind of guy that I would do those kind of things. But
Yeah.
working in recruiting, I mean, it's a powerful tool. And I love it. I'm hooked. It's worse than any other feeling. Just making content, meeting people, memes. I love memes. I don't know why there's so much pushback on that community, but
Yeah.
I really think they're saving the retention metrics for officers all over the Army. So yeah, just kind of hitting it from different ways with social media. And it's been a really cool journey for sure.
Yeah, dude, hell yeah. And I love that for you because, like you said, you've only been doing it for a year. It's been absolutely amazing to see your page blow up with all kinds of people coming in, and you have probably thousands. I'm not going to look at my phone right now, but like thousands of followers, and it's insane how fast you've grown. But we're just gonna go right into it, man, because you're on your lunch break. Time is short, and we got stuff to talk about, baby. So tell
Yeah.
me, before the Army, well, what were you doing before the Army?
I was in high school. So something a lot of people
Okay.
don't know about me. I was homeschooled. So I came in from a pretty big family, 6 kids. Mom and dad didn't own a TV for a long time. So that's why our family is so large. So we say I had an
Yeah.
older brother. He had gone through RTC, and he had been in the reserves and the guard. So I kind of graduated high school not knowing what I wanted to do in my life. And my parents, single income, a lot of kids. I knew I had to figure out a way to pay for school. I basically had 3 options. I could go to the community college, stay at home, find an ROTC scholarship, go somewhere else, or enlist. My parents were always a big fan of that as well. And so I went after an ROTC scholarship out at Carson Newman University, Tennessee. It's right next to
Oh
the Oak
yeah.
Tree over in over there in Tennessee. A lot of people haven't heard of that school. So yeah, I went 4 years there on a scholarship, and kind of the same thing, man. Like when I started to wrap up my time as a cadet, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Well, I guess I did know what I wanted to do, but I didn't want a hard life in the Army. I wanted an easy route, like as in Intel or AG, some
Okay.
kind of office job. And I got branched infantry.
Of course, like every yeah,
Yeah.
of course, like everybody in those Christian MOSs.
Yeah, and I really felt like that. Every time I watch the movie Fury, I always feel like that one guy who ended up with the tank crew, because like there's no way this can be happening. But I'll tell you, like that was the best thing that happened to me because I remember that night I went and rucked 7 or 8 miles, and I never did that ever on my own time. I mean my grades were good, things like that, and I mean I always did well on my PT test, but I did not want a hard life. And then commissioned, and then went off to training for IBOIC, and that was an interesting time too because I was there with a lot of West Pointers who I'd never worked with before, and those guys were hard charging alpha males, and I was not that way for sure. I was still kind of finding myself and my leadership style. And then the big test, because after IBOIC was going to Ranger School, and I had a really good NCO at my RTC program who had been a former RI. I spent a lot of time in the 101st. And he really just took me under his wing and was like, you can do this, you just can't quit. And had a little bit of an extra stay there, recycled up in mountains, but I made it through. And that was kind of, I feel like the first time in my career I was like, man, look what, I mean, I did something hard. And I felt like there were a lot of people who didn't think John Howell would ever make it through that. And then I got on orders. My wife, she was out here at Fort Lewis. She was on active duty as a nurse. We met in ROTC. And I came out here to Fort Lewis too. Thankfully, they stationed us together. And showed up at 123 Infantry. I went straight to a platoon. Looking back, I mean, I didn't appreciate it then, but didn't have any time on staff. Went straight to a platoon. And then I was lucky.
That's kind of sweet, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. There was another guy. He took like another day of leave, showed up the next day, and he was in the 3-shot for like 6 months. He got a platoon. So it was like great timing, just great timing.
Yeah.
And then I went to the platoon, and I had some really good NCOs that one in particular, a squad leader that just, once again, just took me under his wing. And my commander was a pretty aggressive guy. I wouldn't say it was pretty rough those first 8 months as a PL. It was definitely not what I was expecting, but those NCOs took care of me. And yeah, I mean, after that, I was a mortar PL, got selected for that, which that was a blast because it's like a second chance at redemption. And then probably the I guess you could say it was the crucible was being an HACXO. I rotated into that. But with each of those 3 jobs, I had a lot of fun. And I guess I didn't cover this earlier. The one thing about when I branched, I technically did get MI. I was branch detailed infantry. So when I promoted to captain, I switched to intel. Went to the career course down in Arizona, and I was hunting a deployment at that point. And the one that was open that I saw was an MI unit at Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty. Fort Bragg.
We're calling it Bragg. We're calling it Bragg,
man. I went over there to an MI unit, 525, and it was definitely a culture shock, just coming from the infantry, very different kind of organization. But I had fun, and the deployment was good. I worked with a lot of great people. And then 18 months of company command there at HAC Brigade, which was fun. Really enjoyed working with a lot of good people. And my plan was my battalion commander from up here at Fort Lewis, he took 1st Brigade 82nd. And I was like, I'm going to go over there. And my branch told me, no, you're not. You're going to go to Fort Huachuca, Arizona and be a Captain Career Course instructor. And I was pretty torn up about that. And because I did not want to go there. I wanted to get some S2 time and be with an airborne unit. And so I was pretty torn up about that, pretty pissed at the Army or my branch manager. And around that same time, I had a guy I'd worked with. He had been my battalion S4. He called me about opportunities at full-time with the National Guard here in Washington. And the first thing he told me was like, hey, if you come here, you don't have to work Mondays. And I was like, that cannot be true. There's no place in the Army that doesn't work Mondays. Someone's out in the motor pool somewhere.
Yeah.
But also around that same time, I realized like, hey, I was gone for a year, missed a year on my oldest son's life. I got 3 boys, by the way. And it was time to lay down some roots. And so I did it, leap of faith. I applied for the Washington Army National Guard, AGR, Active Guard Reserve. And they accepted me. Then I went through the process of getting out of active duty, which was kind of funny because I showed up at the career course. I've been working there for a couple of months, and I was like, hey, by the way, I got accepted for this. I'm going to be dropping my unqualified resignation here shortly. And thankfully, the major I was working for, I'd worked with him before. A lot of luck, right, with the people I've worked with and the timing. But I'd worked with him before. He was really helpful with the whole process of getting out and off of active duty. And then we rotated up here to Washington, and it's been great. I really appreciate it. I didn't know anything about the National Guard or the talent they have here. And yeah, I came to the Guard, not really know what to expect, but I have to say I've been pretty impressed. And I worked for the 81st Striker Brigade up here. I got to knock out another infantry company command, which is sweet. They didn't care if I was intel. I was like, you've got an infantry background, we'll get you lined up. And had a company out of Yakima and got to do awesome things with them. And on the full-time side, I worked as a Brigade AS3 for 6 months, and then I got told I was moved to recruiting. And I was not happy. I was not happy about that. And because I was like, I don't want anything to do with that, And that's really where, I mean, to be honest, man, like I came in and was like, I'm gonna do work and do a good job, but I mean, I don't know anything about this. And it really opened my eyes, just especially for the National Guard. I mean, even for active duty, just how important it is to find good talent and the right people, and always be selling, always be closing.
Yeah.
When it kind of comes to the military, So, and that really launched me kind of into social media and why we're doing this podcast today, because everywhere I looked, people are on their phones. And I never did anything on social media ever. I did when I was at Fort Bragg, I had a internal company Facebook page, but it was
Oh, like the
private,
FRG.
just for, yeah. But I definitely wasn't doing anything like this. And it's funny, I started my page as a company page for my infantry company for recruiting. And all I was posting was like, because it's hard in the guard, right? Because you're only drilling once a month to come up with content, because you're only seeing those guys once a month or 2 weeks in the summer. So like some of my early posts, if you looked at my page, it was like me just working out, just lame stuff, getting like 2 likes, and started to pick up a little bit more. I took my company, I went with my battalion to Thailand for annual training. And when I got back from there, Sergeant Tyler Butterworth, who was kind of like my mentor in all of this, can't say
Oh,
enough
shit,
good
yeah.
things. Yeah, you need to have him on for sure.
Yeah, love to.
I can link you up. Yeah, he came out here. This is still when he was a recruiter in Virginia. And he came out here and we met for like 24 hours and we shot some videos with him. He showed me how to do it. And he really told me, he's like, if you want to grow, if you want to reach more people, you can post all the cool shooting videos and all that stuff and you working out, but you need to focus on humor. I never really was like, I can't do that, but I mean, I saw it. I saw him do it, and having us in some of his videos. It's like, well, let's give it a try. And I had another guy. He was in my company and also working full time. He's now a lieutenant, but he was a sergeant first class at the time, former regiment guy. And we just started making videos together. And yeah, it was. We started them out and definitely didn't know what we were doing. And they started to pick up, and then I had a couple other guys that kind of jumped in and piled on. And the whole time, Sergeant Butterworth's providing like mentorship, like do this a little bit better. Like he's like, your content's good, but adjust this in the video. And yeah, we just kept doing it. And now it's like, I mean, just the amount of people that have been involved in some of the videos. Like there's a USAREC recruiter. He was born in Korea. I've linked up with him, brought him down here. He works up north of JBLM. Yeah, just getting with him. And he's a big YouTube guy, like 200,000 subscribers.
Jeez.
Yeah, I know, right? Like he's making some change, but yeah, just kind of having that network was super cool because I never thought I would work with guys on active duty and being able to just talk to people in the DMs about joining the Guard, and I think it has helped. I've met a couple of cadets and they've asked me why I do it, and I tell them a lot. It's it's for recruiting, because we've got a recruiter on here for the state. But I mean, secondly, I think it helps as an officer, just someone like showing that like, hey, we're not all assholes. You can have a sense of humor, and I think that's better for the force when senior leaders can convey that out to a population and be like, hey, we're just humans too, even with this rank, and we can be approachable. So yeah, I know that was long-winded, and I'm sorry.
No, that was great. That was great.
That kind of catches me up to where I am today, and it's been really cool. Just my goal is to own JBLM. Like I don't really care about. My first goal was like I want to get to 10,000 followers on Instagram, and that was a lot of work. I will say, like it seemed like it took forever, but owning JBLM is my like passion. Like getting out there as much as I can because I meet guys from active duty all the time who are getting out. And trying to get them into the Guard is like a big part of my mission. I definitely used my position here in recruiting to support my company. If ever I found out there was a guy like in 275 who was getting out, I'd go meet them for coffee. I'd tell them about the Guard.
Yeah.
I'd usually take Anderson with me, and we'd sell them, give the Guard pitch, and just kind of make it, I guess, sell the benefits of part-time service. It's like, hey, you don't have to hang it up right now. And in some ways, I think, especially in our day and age, it helps those guys out a lot because they still put the uniform on at least once a month. They're still around people who are in the military. And so I always advise anyone come off active duty, if you still got some time to go till retirement, just do it through the Guard. It's helpful. I think it really is.
Yeah, that was a lot, and it was very informative, and it was great. But I have a lot to unpack there with leadership and social media and your career.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. It was great. I'm going to start with asking about your career, right? Are there any moments with like like a training environment, or just kind of just in on post, where that are kind of like ingrained in your memory, that it's just one of those things like, I can't believe this is actually happening to me, or I can't believe this is actually happening to us in this company?
I would say the biggest, I guess it was more of like I was on the risk, on the fence, of like, am I going to survive this and be fired? Was the first time I ever did platoon live fires, because I already mentioned, and I have to say this, like that company commander I first worked with, I worked with him a lot. He took HAC afterwards, and things got better over time. I think he was figuring out a lot of things too. But he was very abrasive. And it was February of 2015. We had platoon live fires in Yakima, which brutal, just snow, rain, mud, all of it. And he had told us right before, a couple of weeks before, he's like, he had looked me dead in the eyes, and he's like, you know what makes me more nervous than anything is that you're about to do platoon live fires, and I have no idea what you're going to do when you get out there. And so like the intensity was just dialed up. And I remember I got together with some of my other PLs, and we just talked about how we were going to do things. And that one squad leader really, remember, we just sat in the office with a whiteboard, and we drew up our scheme, and we had the field manuals open. And that was an NCO just grabbing me and like, Lieutenant, let's do this together. This is one team, one fight. And that guy wasn't even my platoon sergeant, just really showing me the ropes. And we went out there to Yakima, and the weather sucked. It was cold as hell, and we were out there for a couple of weeks. But when it came for platoon live fires, I mean, I remember I made my guys rehearse the night before, the op order, doing drills together. And then when it was go time at 3:00, I think it was on like a Friday morning, still dark, rolling up with the strikers and pitching the order. And the whole time, I mean, I'm feeling good about it, but I don't know, my company commander's just like bearing into me, and
The pressure's
BC and
on.
battalion, it was dialed up. Like I never felt like I was closer to failing. And yeah, pitched the order. I mean, it went great because it was a team effort. Like my NCOs were briefing as part of the order. It was just like a culminating moment. It's like, man, I can freaking do this. And then we got out in the snow, and I mean, it sucked, but yeah, I mean, it went fine, and even the live portions, and it was. I mean, there were definitely. I remember I was bounding up to an area to set the 240s, and I just fell completely on my face. And like, like if you could see it, just like, oh, I didn't
Just
scream
a
or anything.
straight up
But
yard sale.
yeah, just all the way down. I mean, I just got back up, and I just kept moving to
Yeah.
that position. So one of my E5s, kind of he was the wild guy of the platoon. He's like, I didn't know, sir, if you were going to cry or if you were going to get back up again. And it's like, I was really glad he got back up and kept moving. But I mean, the platoon live fire went great because it was the platoon. It wasn't just me. I mean, I could not have done that by myself. And I watched other platoon leaders get relieved or fired from that time. And it was just coming back from that and knowing that like my platoon helped me do it. Just, yeah, given the training environment, given the stress coming from my commander, like it was dialed into me. The temperature was just dialed up on me. Yeah, I felt like everything was there. Like I could have failed, but because of some other great people around me, we succeeded. So I've always, and what's funny is coming to the National Guard. I mean, when I was in Thailand, I did company live fires there with the Thai Army. And the whole time when I'm prepping my National Guard company to doing that, I'm thinking back to those days as a lieutenant and, just how we're going to plan this, how we're going to do this. And I could just hear those NCOs talking in my ears from, 7, 8 years ago, still then, and the live fires went great there then too. So yeah, it's just that event, it really just shaped me kind of as a man, and I would say as a leader, because it just forced me to realize like you cannot do something on your own. You've got to get buy-in, and if you can build that team wherever you're at in recruiting, TRADOC, whatever it is, it doesn't matter how terrible the unit environment is. If you can take care of and bring the people closest to you together, man, you'll win every
They'll take
time.
care of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And like you said, you were like your platoon did it. You're the one that's leading the pack. But your platoon was the one that helped you execute and be successful. And then, like you said, you were successful because of that. And that moment actually really just stays with you and shaped you as a man and as a leader. And I'd say that was a successful story, man, because you felt the pressure. And then when you were in Thailand, you felt the same pressure, even though it was a completely different scenario. Like you felt the same pressure. You're like, all this pressure's on me. I gotta be good. I gotta do my own stuff. I gotta make sure, check my P's and Q's and all that good stuff. But you know that your guys are gonna take care of you, and you know how to build a team, and you know how to build a good culture around a team. Which leads me to a good question, though. In your experience being active duty and National Guard, how do leadership styles differ between both of those?
So I guess one thing I've really appreciated more in the National Guard is kind of the disciplined initiative that's given to leaders, because we are spread out. I mean, we've got units all over Washington, and my battalion commander wasn't always there. Even now, when I work in recruiting, my battalion commander is not here every day. You know, it's usually once or twice, 3 times, because he's in another part of the state, you know, on the east side. And just having I would say that's kind of cool, because we're so remote in some areas, and just you got to have that mutual trust. Like I remember coming from, I know I never spent a day on staff as a lieutenant, but when I was at Fort Bragg in Afghanistan, there were like 5 or 6 people checking the weekly tasking order when I was working in the S3. And so when I came to the Guard and I'm in this staff role on the full-time side at the brigade, the 81st Striker Brigade, I finished the order for the week, and I was like, okay, who's going to look at this? And they said, did you write it? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you stand by everything you wrote? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And they're like, go ahead and publish, send it out. And that was a very big shift, because coming from, I mean, I don't know how infantry units do it. I would assume there are people checking, but yeah, that was just a big change for me, because I was like, no one's going to look at this before I publish it out to all these units.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess kind of having that discipline initiative that's allowed, and that kind of mutual trust. I feel like there's more adult rules, because you can't really be that way in the National Guard, because it's a part-time force. You're expecting people to show up to training and to drill each month, each weekend. And I mean, coming from active duty, I mean, I know a lot of people, I mean, they say, you know, micromanagement, and I have seen that played out a lot. Like I think a lot about like just medical readiness. And if you had a soldier who was not going to their appointments, hey, that E6, you're going to go with him everywhere, or you're going to escort him around. And you just don't do that in the National Guard. You can't, because you don't see him enough. So it's completely different. And I mean, I tell that to a lot of the guys I meet off of active duty. Like, I know what you've been through, and I've experienced that before. And just for the National Guard, it's more, I'm not saying laid back, but there's more. It's like, I'm going to expect more out of you, and you're going to give it to me, because if you don't do that, we're going to fail. So yeah, I would just say probably the biggest adjustment in leadership is just having more of that span of control and being trusted more to make shit happen. And I love that. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about the Army National Guard, is just that trust and kind of that freedom. And believe me, like, you screw something up, you're gonna get smashed. Like, it's adult rules, but there are adult consequences too. So yeah, it just I don't know. I guess just that trust is it's one of my favorite things about the Guard. I'm never going back to duty.
That would be the hardest thing for me. I mean, I can't go National Guard, but if I were to go National Guard, it would be the hardest thing for me to not necessarily trust, but actually, I guess trust, because in active duty, and you've experienced it, NCO's got to do barracks checks. You got to make sure an adult man who pays taxes brushed his teeth and shaved his face and got a haircut and stuff like that. Sometimes you have to babysit certain individuals. Sometimes you do, because sometimes certain individuals do not bathe, and now you have to tell them straight to their face, you have to take a shower, right?
Right.
Like, I never thought in my whole life that I would have to tell a grown adult man to take a shower. Going from that to, you know what I'm saying? Going from that culture to going to the National Guard, I would think would be a hard adjustment at first.
It is. And I mean, we tell that, especially, I mean, I think between Anderson and I, we put in 10 dudes off of ETSing 275 guys. And every time I get one, I'm like, man, this is awesome, because you're just going to make us better. but we tell them, it is an adjustment. Like you've been ingrained so much by just that unit and how awesome it is and just the other people around you. And you're going to show up to the National Guard and it's going to be, it's not regiment, and that's okay. It's not supposed to be. But there is that period of where you're adjusting. I think, especially with like guys like Anderson, like he got out from regiment after doing multiple deployments back in the old GWAT era, and he's continued on in service in the Guard. And he didn't plan on doing that. He's just going to do 1 year and then get out. But I mean, he gets the importance, and just even with that transition, just leaving 275 and coming to the National Guard, he's made our organization better.
Yeah. So I guess in the National Guard, from what I'm hearing from you, every individual actually has bigger impact on the unit, whether
I think so.
Than active duty.
I would say so, because I mean, if they don't show up to drill, I mean, where's all our people?
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I'll say, like, as a company commander here in the Washington Army National Guard, I mean, compared to active duty as company commander, I never cared about recruiting. I mean, I cared about retention, because I knew I was judged on it, but I really had to care about both. And I would say it could be harder to retain someone in the National Guard just because, hey, I've got this great civilian job. I don't need this. And so that was a really big point of like that command, was like sitting down with those soldiers and like, hey, what do you want? What do I have to do to keep you in?
And sometimes sometimes it just doesn't connect because, like you said, they have a better job, they have a better plan and stuff like that. And sometimes unfortunately, I'm assuming sometimes you have to take the loss and be like, you're right.
Yeah, sometimes you do. Yeah, sometimes you do. And that really sucks when that happens. But I mean, I made a shit ton of axes with would burn their names on them. I would do whatever it took to get them here, get them to stay. And it was cool to watch that company grow during that time. And I mean, once again, like, it wasn't just me. Like, I wasn't the guy staying up late at night talking to these guys. I had this really cool dude. He's a Green Beret. He came over to my company to be my first sergeant. And just every school you can think of, like Harvard educated. I never thought I would get that resume in the National Guard when I was on active duty. He's like, nah, they're all idiots and they're fat and whatever. I mean, that was definitely how I felt towards the National Guard back then. It was very arrogant. But I remember when I was on Thailand, it was early one morning, and I woke up to go shave, and we were still kind of like in our garrison area. And Mike, that's the guy's name, he's on the phone, and I just see him pacing outside the barracks. It's like, man, what's going on? I thought something was wrong. And he gets off the phone, and I was like, what's going on? Everything okay? He's like, oh, yeah. He's like, I was just talking to this guy. He's getting out of 275, and I was just telling him about the National Guard and, like, how he should come to our company, and he's getting out in, like, 6 months. And I was like, man, dude, like, God, man, I love you, because you got it too, right? And he was former active duty as well before he came to the Guard. But talking over in Thailand on the phone one morning just to a soldier over here at JBLM, like, it wasn't just me. It was there were multiple people recruiting and helping with the retention fight, which matters. It's I'd say the number one priority for the National Guard is keeping our people and recruiting more in.
Yeah, dude, hell yeah. And it sounds like you got a pretty good grasp on it. Obviously, sometimes, like we were talking about, you have to take the loss. And with those tough moments that you have to face during recruiting, obviously, now we're talking about resiliency, right? Because the military does teach you resiliency one way or another, whether you like it or not. Whether it's training exercises, losing a soldier deployed, or losing a soldier from being in the National Guard or active duty. But what's one moment in your career that really tested your will and kind of made you rethink your choice to join?
Yeah, so I'll talk about something, and I'll try not to get emotional. It's a guy who's I'm a really big fan of. I've interviewed him. He's about one episode of my podcast that I've done. And shout out to you, man. Like, I know how much work goes into doing this, so shout out to you, and thanks for having me on. But
of course.
Colonel Eric Kelly, when I interviewed him, he asked his whole speech was about resiliency, and he has a son with genetic disorder. He can't walk, he can't speak. I mean, just a lot of struggle in his life. But for me, one thing he told me back in the past is hardship and struggle. It's a rock, but it changes size. Sometimes it's a massive boulder that you can't even get out of bed with, and then other times it's just that small pebble that's just in your pocket and you can move about freely. It's still there, but you always have it. So when I was at Fort Bragg and deployed to Afghanistan, my wife had found out before the deployment that she was pregnant. And this was our second child. And I went downrange and I was there for like 2 months. And then I got a Red Cross message. My wife was going through a miscarriage. And there was an intel unit, right? And I was still trying to fill out a lot of people in that unit. But they really took care of me. The chaplain was there for me. The guy I worked for, the Brigade S3, I would have thought he was just a giant intel nerd, like I definitely wrote him off when I first met him. It was like, what have you done? Just in my arrogance, like, you don't have a tab. Why should I listen to you? But that guy like walked me down to the flight line and got me onto a plane, and they let me come back. And got my 2 weeks to leave here. They gave me a third week on top of that. And then I had to come back, finish the deployment. We were pretty early on. It was over a year deployment. And all through that, the unit really took care of me. People were checking on me. And something I really drew out of that, and I know there's a lot of pushback on it because I know it was abused by certain leaderships during like the 2020 era. But the Army came up with this construct called the Golden Triangle. And it's basically you identify, a leader, a family member, and a battle buddy. That's your support system. And you're like in the middle of all three of those people. And and I've heard horror stories of, like, not at Fort Bragg, but other loaded duty locations where they were like, hey, as part of your counseling packet, you're going to write these three people in, give me their phone numbers, and provide that to me. And it was just really an abuse of the model. But for me, it worked. I had a guy I was on staff with, Captain Tom Morgan, who was kind of my battle buddy, my younger brother, who's a family member. He's in the Army as well. He was an infantry intel, now an intel officer. I'm still trying to get him to the National Guard. And for my leader, Major Gill, that was my Brigade S3 at the time. And it kind of evolved, right? Because we got back from deployment and my S3 left. And I would like to say Colonel Kelly kind of took that role. So when everything is going to shit, I think the one thing that's going to save your ass is the people around you. And I actually had a opportunity earlier this year to speak to some cadets that were commissioning. And that's what I talked about, because when I started off as a lieutenant, I did not have that support system. I didn't even think about that. I didn't really experience anything that sucked until I was on that deployment. And I always preach that message when people are going through shit, find those three people and talk to them. The worst thing you can do is keep all that in. And it's a model that worked for me. Who knows if it doesn't work for everybody. Like, maybe you just don't have any friends. But seek them out,
Yeah.
and nurture those relationships. I think it's one of the most important things that people in the Army can do. People always talk about mental health and, our suicide rate. And I think a lot of that comes from just soldiers being alone,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would say that would be like just based on when I went through some shit, and that has happened. My wife and I have had 3 miscarriages.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Married. Yeah, and it's funny. Well, it's not funny, but it's after that happened, you find so many other people in the Army who've gone through that. And it's like, I don't really talk about that more, like, why I never heard. I thought it was just a one-off, like, like I'm the only one going through this.
Yeah.
But it's not. That helps me as a leader because I've had soldiers who've gone through it.
Whether you know it or not, people have gone through the same things as you have. It's obviously, like you said, you don't know it. You think it's happening to you at the moment, but you don't really take in consideration that you're not the only person in this world that this is happening to. And it's not until you talk about it that you start connecting with people that have gone through the same things or similar situations, or maybe even worse situations that kind of make you, that kind of connect you. And it's always really interesting to talk to them. And that's why we have this platform, to have people share their stories, share their struggles and stuff like that, but to let other people know that, hey, this is not only happening to you, even though it might feel like it, but other people have gone through similar situations and can definitely you can definitely learn how they've gone through it, or maybe they're still going through it and stuff like that. It's always interesting to see and feel the human domain aspect of the Army at work, because
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience, that wasn't a thing 10 years ago. Like that
Right.
wasn't really a thing. Like you're going through some shit, like you're up late for formation because you and your wife are having a fight. That's your fucking problem. But
Yeah.
now but now the Army's doing a good shift into that. I mean, it's taken some time, but the Army's making a good shift into like, okay, this soldier's late for formation, this soldier's doing this, like their performance is going down. Instead of let's just fucking hammer him, let's figure out, if we can help him. Let's see what's going on. See if we can help him, get him the right resources, which is a huge shift from what was going on 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
but it's the same thing. Like what I'm saying, it's weird to feel that, because you hear these stories and you're like you hear these stories of like soldiers promoting fast, like years back. You hear these soldiers promoting fast. Their NCOs push them to the board. The NCOs are like at their baby showers. They know their soccer practice and stuff like that, and they're actually supporting them. And you're like, where the fuck are you? Like, what unit are you in where your NCOs and your officers are actually supporting you? Like, it was such a wild concept back then, but now it's more or less the norm.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have some stragglers out there, and unfortunately, you have some stragglers out there. But it's being seen a lot more, and it's. I'm not gonna lie. When I kind of feel when I've the first time I encountered that was like 3 years ago, and it was kind of weird because I'm like I was going through some stuff, and I'm like, I don't know if you're asking me this to just put it on my counseling and like to tell me that it's not like I shouldn't bring that in, or you're asking me to like actually help me. Like it was so confusing, and it's just another like I said, it's a shift in the army generation. And I'm sorry about all the things that you've gone through, but it's definitely helped you be resilient and help other people because of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy what the army will put you through, man. But let me ask you, we're just going to shift a little bit. Speaking of shifts, um, in your obviously the army is a well-oiled machine, right? But in your career, right? In your career, going through all your experiences and going through everything that you've gone through, if you had full control of the army, what's one thing that you would change?
I think I would do, I guess one thing I've kind of always struggled with, and in some ways, like if you pulled up my bio on Instagram, you would see, I think it says at the top, should have enlisted.
Should have enlisted.
That's kind of, that's kind of I mean, even my handle at Servant of Leaders, it's kind of, I mean, it's sarcasm, right? The one
Mhm.
thing that is, I guess it's irked me and kind of annoyed me is just some of the, I'm speaking for the officer corps. I'm not talking about top level, I'm talking about my peers, even, lieutenants. It's just kind of the arrogance that our corps can have. And I really, I mean, it's kind of one of those things like I bring this up when if I ever ran an LPD, but one of the biggest things that always pissed me off was when you went to like a CTC or if you went
Mhm.
anywhere and it came time for bag download and a leader said, "Hey, I need a group of soldiers to go pick up my bags, and bring them to me." And that whenever I heard that, I was like, "What the hell are you doing? Like you've got two arms and two legs. Go get them yourself."
Yeah.
And I think that's what I would change probably the most. And just with the officer corps is like, just because you have that rank on, like that doesn't make you any better than that E4 or E5. Just because you have a college degree does not mean that you're at such a high level. Like there's nothing more that will make a soldier love you and be committed to you and your team than when you don't mind, rolling up your sleeves, dropping the blouse, and getting out there and working.
Yeah.
And I saw that on deployment too. I remember there was a task we had to redo the sandbags all on the bunkers. By the way, I was a FOBIT, so not a very cool deployment. But we had to do all the sandbags on the
Oh,
bunkers,
that
like
is
in our
not a fun
yeah.
job. That's not a fun task. I've had to do that. I've had to do that. It's terrible.
Yeah, and it really just showed like which leaders kind of cared about pitching in,
Yeah.
and which ones could just walk by after going to the DFAC and coming back and going back to their office. And and it was officers, right? It was officers. And I mean, I saw tons of senior NCOs out there who didn't care about like,
Yeah.
yeah, I might get some sand on me, but I'm going to help out with the team. And so I think that would be the biggest thing I would change is just kind of reminding or mentoring officers as they come in and as they grow, like, hey, I don't care that you're the company commander. You can get out there and PMCS your own vehicle. You can do
Yeah.
that. You should do that. And I think it would solve a lot of issues probably with retention and just kind of the face out of the Army because like, why would I want to stay in an organization where the guy who's like the dude, the face of the organization isn't willing to, get out there and be part of the team with me. I know it's cliche and it's overused, but I mean, nothing trumps servant leadership. It never does. Just being able to go the extra mile, especially as an officer. And I don't care what your background is, whether you went to West Point, ROTC, or any of that. You should never think you're better than an enlisted soldier or a warrant officer just because you got a commission and you went to school, or your
Yeah.
position.
And I had that not coming to Jesus moment, but I came to that realization one time where one of our Sergeant First Class in the motor pool, I forget what we were doing in the field, but he was doing it with us, and we're like, Sergeant V, shout out to Sergeant V, by the way. We're like, Sergeant V, like, we got this. What are you doing? Like, we got this. And he's just like, no, I'm going to help you guys. And we're like, but you don't have to. He's like, I know I don't have to, but it's about leading from the middle. And I never understood that until he actually explained it. And I was like, what do you mean serving, like leading from the middle? And he said, because if I lead from the front, then I leave you behind. If I lead from the back, then I'm putting you guys in front of me to deal with all the bullshit so I don't have to deal with it. If I'm leading from the middle, I'm in the shit with you guys. I'm doing it right next to you. There's nothing that you're doing that I'm not going to do and that I haven't done. And I was like, blew my absolute mind.
Yeah, it's good.
It blew my absolute mind because I was like, well, that's an interesting take on it because you don't want to leave your guys behind. I mean, obviously, lead from the front because you want to set an example, but it's just a different metaphorical view on it. And I thought it was absolutely wild because that was my first look on what a really good leader looks like, and it
Yeah.
blew my fucking mind.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna steal that now. I'll claim it as my own.
You better tag me in that one.
Oh man, that's good. That's really good.
It's a good one though, right? Because it's very interesting because when you first hear it, you're like, no, the Army taught me to lead from the front because that's how we do. But as a leader, when you lead from the middle, you're showing your guys that you're in there with them, and you're not going to make them do something that they haven't done, something that you can't do. You're not that guy on bag detail, just like bring me all the bags, you know.
Yeah.
But it's actually quite interesting. Now I'm just going to ask you a quick question about your content because your content is very interesting and it's very hilarious
Oh,
because
thanks.
your content highlights the quirks of military life. But and obviously the quirks of military life, but what's the most absurd regulation that you've encountered? I'll tell you one off of the top of my
Okay.
head.
Yeah.
Is that
Go ahead.
there's a regulation 670-1. I have it somewhere here. 670-1 tells you how to wash your uniform, which I think is the absolute wildest regulation ever. I'm like, how to wash your uniform? I'm like, all right, cool. But it's just wild. Or we can rephrase that question. What is your favorite with the Army being in the time that you have been being a company commander and now being a major? What is one of your most favorite traditions? We'll call it traditions. My favorite one
Um.
is qualifying. Love that.
Yeah. Let's see. Favorite traditions. One that I always love, and I haven't done it in a while, to be honest. Probably, I would say my favorite job I ever had was being a mortar platoon leader. But it's
Mhm.
definitely it's a different type of MOS. 11 Charlie. I feel like it's the bastard of the infantry, but I love that job. I had good people I worked with. A lot of them were lower enlisted. I mean, I had E4s being squad leaders, things that were wild. But going to the range with them and doing the burning of the cheese at the end, like that is. Have you ever done that before?
You're gonna have to walk me through that because I was a
So
mechanic and then I went soft.
yeah, when you burn the cheese, when you shoot mortars, there's basically gunpowder that you put on the kind of the tail of the mortar, and you have different charges for where you want to shoot it. So if you want to shoot it farther, you keep them all on. If you want to shoot them shorter, you take it off. There's all kinds of math and science and stuff that 11 Charlie's nerd out about all the time. But there's all these cheese, they call it cheese rounds because it looks like cheese, but it's got gunpowder in it. And at the end, there's always a ton of them. And so what you do is you stack them up in this giant pyramid, and you open one of them, and you do just like the old westerns, a gunpowder trail away.
Okay.
And what you do, and it's kind of like, it is a tradition for mortars, because usually it's a great time for great photos, great videos. And so you'll set up who's going to be in front of the cheese and burning the cheese. You have one guy that lights this trail of gunpowder, and it burns slowly, and then it hits this mountain of cheese charges. And when it goes up, it's like, it's just a giant like mushroom cloud. And usually every time there's a group of 11 Charlies that aren't standing that far away from it, and they do some like super cool like video, like walking away from it in slow motion. It's like, yeah, it's always kind of like a big event. And then it always ends with, because you always underestimate the how fast and how hot it's going to be. So the video or the photo always ends with people running away because you think you're about to be consumed by the fire. And the first time I ever took part of that as a mortar PL, I was like, "Can we actually do this?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, range control is completely fine with this. Like it's part of it. We do it every time we shoot out here." And so. Yeah, there have been times, man, I've got videos. I'm actually going to shoot for the brigade. I'm going to shoot a video about like reasons why you should become 11 Charlie or join as 11 Charlie. And it's going to be stuff like they always play spades, right? And $10,000 bonus. But if you're a pyromaniac, like that is the MOS for you. You will touch or see the hottest fire you have ever seen without being consumed by it by joining that MOS. But it was just it's just a cool tradition. I mean, there's tons of like the spades thing with 11 Charlie is huge because it's just such a different life from 11 Bravo. Because I remember the first time I ever went to a mortar shoot, you could see the infantry platoon, like the 11 Bravos, maneuvering out there, and we're just, all right, next round, throw it. Is it good? Yep, observed. And I asked my platoon sergeant, like, what's the best part about being 11 Charlie? And he looks over and points at the 11 Bravos, and he goes, not doing that shit. It's like, I'm going to get back to my spades game after this is over. So the burning the cheese, I think that's it. And I know that's not, it's not like the tradition, like down in a regulation, but with that MOS and with infantry units, like it's just something that happens every time they go to shoot, and it's always something cool. There's never been a cheese fire where I wasn't like, oh, that was lame. Like they've always just been awesome.
It's always a big finale with that.
Yeah. So if you ever get a chance to go out and hang mortars, do it and try to do it towards the end so you can be a part of that.
That'd be pretty fucking sweet.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question real quick before we wrap up. Let me ask you a question real quick about your page, right? Because the Army says you're a soldier 24/7. The Army demands a lot of your time, even the National Guard, Army, especially AGR, right? The Army demands a lot of your time from you. How do you find the balance, the real sweet spot between your career and maintaining an active social media presence?
Yeah, so it's funny, like the ideas that come about.
How do you come up with these ideas?
Random. I found a lot of them are like usually before and after PT. That's usually when I get my ideas. Yeah, like on the drive in, I have like a 30-minute drive in to work. And I still PT, even though I'm in the National Guard. All right, just want to get disclaimer. We do PT. All right, all right. But just like those ideas. And to be honest, man, like I don't do them during the workday. I mean, there might be like the one I did yesterday with one of my NCOs. We had like 10 minutes before our next meeting. I was like, you want to shoot this video real quick? Here's the idea. So we ran out and did it. But I'd say a lot of them happen before work. I'll either come in early, shoot it, or I'm not the best time manager. I usually come in early, and then I get sidetracked easily with just the list of shit I need to get done. But hey, when everyone's gone from the office, or shoot some videos then. And I mean, that's one cool thing I think about the National Guard. There seems to be a lot of freedom from your chain of command to, produce your content. I've never, and they've all been senior leaders have been very favorable to it. And I think a lot of that has to do with just how we have to recruit our own force, like everyone in the National Guard. I mean, whether you
Because
like
times
it
are
or not.
changing now.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I've never received any pushback from senior leaders in the Guard saying like, "Hey, why are you doing that? Like, I mean, you idiot! Like, we don't want you doing that out there."
Yeah.
And they've all been very supportive. But yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I'll tell you, especially when it comes down, and you know this because you edit this podcast, you can consume hours of time doing that. And
You can.
sometimes, like, yeah, and I really got into that when I first started doing. I mean, the reels are easy, like editing those super easy, but the long form content is such a pain in the ass. And our brigade commander, Colonel Broyles, one thing I love about him, he really appreciates social media. He's been in some of the skits, even though he's in '06. And he likes to do. He's a really good teacher, a really good instructor. Very smart guy. And I've done YouTube long form with him for the brigade's social media and YouTube. And there's been sometimes like I set up like 3 cameras and just editing, chopping all that up, syncing everything together. That can take like an hour. Thankfully, I mean, my wife, she's been very supportive of this. I mean, there are times she's like, can you just get off your phone? All right. And so
You're like, I'm sorry, I'm almost done.
Yeah, I try to stay off of that as much as I can at the house. But the editing part is definitely the part on the long form. I mean, there's some evenings like on Saturdays, it's like I'm up to like 10:30, 11, just chopping up YouTube videos.
That is late, man. I'm sorry, but that is late. 10:30,
Yeah.
11?
Well, it's one thing I love about the memes. I don't know. It's just like I think it's pretty easy to crank those out. Usually what I'll do, I've got a 4-year-old son, and he doesn't go to bed by himself. Like, you have to put him to bed. And so when I'm waiting for him to fall asleep, and sometimes I can take 30, 40 minutes, I'll have a meme idea, or I'll find a template, and it's like, I'll just crank this out real fast, really easy meme. But yeah, I mean, the family's been very supportive of it too. I mean, my oldest son, he's been in a couple of the videos. And some of them, there's this one video, it did really well on TikTok, and it did well on Instagram, but it's based on a real life event where I was at his karate. One of his friends comes up, and I'm in uniform, and he asked, like, have you ever been to war? And I was like, well, yeah, I deployed to Afghanistan. And my son's right there, and he's like, yeah, but he didn't really go to war. He was doing PowerPoint and working on the computer.
Oh.
It's like, get over here. Like, no one gets to say that. Only me. And so we did a video over here just on Camp Murray. I brought him in. I think we did it on a Saturday morning about how, like, I'm having a conversation with just some random guy, and I'm playing both of the adults. And then my son's right next to me. He's like, yeah, but he didn't really deploy. That's why we call him a pogue at home.
Oh.
So, yeah, I mean, that was all, that whole skit and everything. That's based off a real life situation. And, I own I've never, I've never been in a firefight or anything like that. So I own the whole term of pogue. I'll admit it. I'm a 35 series, still dabbling around with the infantry here in the Guard, but, I've never done anything super badass, so I'll own it. But those are
That
like
hurt
my
me. I'm not gonna lie.
those are some of my videos where it's inspired by something that happens with your family, and then it's original. That too. It's not a ripoff. I'm not copying someone else, which I have done that with some of the other content. I mean, it's a parody of theirs, but like that one, it's like it's such a cool video because it's like saw this from cradle to grave from him humiliating me in front of his friend, to producing that video and then posting it and watching so many other people find it funny, so I think that
you got to be able to make fun of yourself.
Videos. Yeah,
you got to be able to make fun of yourself in the Army.
Yeah, I mean, and some of these recent videos, I mean, they're super cringy, but I don't know if you've seen any of the ones where it's like an officer like having a conversation with one of his PLs, and you can't see the other guy, but it's just the one officer talking. I made one of those, and it was titled "Your Company Commander" after they finished yelling at their PLs, and I posted that and thought this isn't gonna go anywhere. You know, like it's just going to be lame, and people, and it's like, man, it's kind of, you know, resonating with people. And that was one of the biggest. I mean, this was a couple of weeks ago. I was like, man, people really respond well to relatable content.
Yeah.
You know, better than anyone, better than anything. And a lot of the times you have to make fun of yourself, you know, or the officer corps for that. And I mean, a lot of people have been like, man, that's so cringy, but it's so true. You know, like an officer, I worked for an officer that was like that. You know, a lot of those,
Yeah.
I call them officer conversations. A lot of those are based off things I've seen or I've done or I've witnessed, just being you know, an idiot officer just talking to someone. So yeah, but they're relatable, and that's what's cool. And I think that will be something I try to do going on with content. It's like, how can I just make this as relatable as I can be to someone that's in
But
the
your
military?
experiences, literally just by putting your experiences out there.
Yeah, yeah. It's always funny just to see like how many like lieutenants like, my company commander did this to me today. It's like, I want to send this to them. I've had old people from my old unit, so it's like, hey, is this content based off of me? I was like, no, there's another guy that was there. Or like, was this
Or
content based
somebody.
off such and such? And I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So it's funny when that happens too, when people catch on. It's like, wait a second, he's talking about things that really happened.
Somebody's like, I was there when that fucking happened. I know
Yeah.
who you're talking about. You're like, fuck.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, content being relatable and being able to poke fun at yourself, like I think it goes a long ways. Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's just funny doing this for a year. I guess specifically with humor, just kind of funny to reflect on where it's gone.
Yeah.
I never
Yeah.
thought it would end up like this.
Yeah, your page is blown up like a motherfucker, and it's absolutely wild. And I love to see that for you because you're putting your hard work into it, you're putting your experiences into it. And I'm sorry that your child called you a pogue, and I'm so sorry about that.
And you know, one thing I'll say about like all of that, like it's, if you do it just for the social media fame, like it's super empty. It is, because like you can post a video and it can have millions of people like it and watch it, but then you're always constantly thinking about like what's next, you know, or like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, I don't have something to post today. So I think if you can line your social media up with like something that's like a good effort, like recruiting. Like I love when someone messages me, he's like, hey, I want to switch to, you know, from Vermont Guard to Washington. Finding some balance in that with social
Mhm.
media is definitely helpful. And I told this to Tyler Butterworth. I was like, I don't want to get too big. I've really been tempted to lock it down, kind of make it more of like a private page, because I feel like when you get so big, it just stops being fun. And yeah, for me, like I haven't made any money off it either. And in a way, I don't want to, because I don't want people to call me out like, oh, you're just doing this for money. And so there's something to be said about like, you know, knowing your bounds and being able to stay small. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, huge. I mean, I know that it could be so much bigger, but I think there's a lot to be said about maintaining kind of a small following. Yeah, in a way,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. I don't know.
No, it totally makes sense because you know I do these episodes and I edit them and I put my time into editing them and stuff like that, and then I chop up reels so people can see it, so people can go check out the whole episode. Sometimes the reels just don't do well. Sometimes the
Yeah,
episodes don't do well, and that's just, you know, I put my put my best foot forward on both ends. Sometimes it just don't do well, and I'm like, okay. And at some point, I was really focused on. I had kind of the same mentality at some point because I was like, I need to get this out there. I need to push this forward. Like I need to make this bigger so people can listen to this episode. But then I thought, like, there's to me that that loses the point of getting people's story out there. Like my biggest thing here is to let other people know that what they're going through isn't the same, isn't they're not alone in it, right?
right.
Other people have gone through the same thing. You can connect with these people, right? Because tag in those videos and all that stuff, or somebody like one of your soldiers maybe just like, hey, I didn't know that about you, and you're like, oh yeah, great, I'm glad you enjoyed the episode, right? But something small like that. But I feel like if you try to shoot too far too fast, then it just becomes disingenuous. And
Yeah,
that's what I think you were talking about. It just becomes disingenuous, and you don't really, like you said, you don't enjoy the process anymore. and just completely transformed to something that you were not ready for and something that you weren't looking forward to, and now it's a job and you're like, I know it's too much to handle. That's why I had to shift, because I'm like, you know what, as long as I'm getting the stories out there, as long as somebody's listening to it, I don't care if one person listens to it or 1,000 people listen to it. As long as somebody's
Yeah.
listening to this story and resonating with the story, that's all that really matters, you know.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, when I did that first podcast with Colonel Kelly, like, it didn't do very well. I think like 300 people watched it on YouTube, and it was long, right? But I had on Instagram, I had a captain who he messaged me, and he's like, "Man," he's like, "I needed that." He's like, "I'm I'm working in a S3 shop somewhere," and he's like, "I really needed to hear that episode today." And I didn't know this guy from anyone, like it's like it might have been like an anonymous account, and who knows if it was true, but knew about the video. And then
It was
to
Colonel
me,
Kelly's
like,
burner account.
it's playing with my soul right here. But yeah, he's listening to this right now. It's like, I got him. No, Colonel Kelly's a good dude. But it's like, just like a vignette like that one story, that's better than a million people listening to it, like that helped someone out that day. So yeah, I guess that my message, anyone that's listening and is trying to do stuff through social media or communicate a message, like, hey, you never know, it might meet the right person that needs to hear it at that time, and that's worth more than a million followers or anything. So
Yeah. And
yeah,
John, I'm sorry, I'm going to call you Major.
that's fine. No.
Major
You can call it John. It's cool.
John, man, it's been great having you here today. We're not going to wrap up just yet. Before we wrap up, I have a couple questions for you, just two last questions for you. But before we wrap up, before we head out, I'm gonna play this game called Go or No Go at Major Howell Station. Okay.
Okay.
Now it's just a go. It's just you at your station. Soldiers coming up, and this is a go or no go for you. Okay.
Okay.
Calling cadence when not in a unit formation or a run.
Not in any unit formation or run?
Yeah.
No go. It seems pointless.
Okay. The phrase, and officers love to do this, no offense. The phrase orientate the map.
No go. It's made up.
Hell yeah. Because it's orienting yourself to the map. Thank you.
Yes.
The word behoove.
It is a word, but I'm going to say no go because it's been overused. Just
Okay.
doesn't work.
White Sox during PT.
White? Absolutely not. Come on. Sergeant Major Daly did that for us. We have to abide by him. Okay? Absolutely not.
That's hilarious.
Absolutely not. You
You
want to
can't
lose
trust them,
points
dude.
if you want to lose points with me, show up with white tube socks on.
Oh,
I will
man,
not trust you.
I really hope that that your unit is listening to this and just people show up with white socks and PTs.
Gosh, I hate them. I don't even like when I wear civilians in workout. I will not wear white socks. Like, I would wear my black long darn tufts like over like white socks. I hate them. We got rid of them a long time ago.
We suffered through white socks and PTs, and we couldn't tell who was a snitch or not. And then we got black socks. Like, that was a real turn of events for us, to be honest. For those who were there.
It's funny.
For
I
those
was
who were there, it
talking
was
with
great.
Dank Memes for Dragon Teens, and I were talking about Sergeant Major Daly this week. I never got to meet him, but just like that change, that subtle change he made, that didn't cost the Army anything.
Mm-mm.
It was just super cool. And I remember the first day I went to PT and we got to do those. Like, everyone showed up with black socks.
It felt so great.
Yeah, it was a big deal,
great.
and it proved morale. And it's so funny. Like, I don't even know if I really even thought about it that much when I was a lieutenant prior to that change. But like, man, what an awesome move. I hope he came up with that idea on his own, because it's just a great move. It improved morale, and it was so easy.
It was a power move for sure. It was a power move for sure. Do you remember when we had to roll up our sleeves at Bragg?
So I didn't live through that. I was out here at Fort Lewis, and so I never got to do that. Funny thing, though, is when I came to the Guard, when I was a company commander, there were a lot of guys that wanted to do that for some reason. And I was like, and I looked in the regulation, and I was like, okay, here's what we'll do. You're authorized to do it. Just don't do it in formation, and don't do it when battalion's here. Okay? It's like our company internal thing. And it was funny. We were doing it for like 6 months, and then our sergeant major, who's a great dude, awesome guy, I love him to death. He like great. He's been a part-time guy his whole time in the guard, and he had been in my company when he was a soldier way back when. He was like, "Stop doing that, all right? What do you think you're special?" But I mean, it was one of those things like they really wanted to do it, and I never did it here at Fort Lewis. It doesn't get that hot here, but I do remember seeing the photos of buddies I had that went to brag who were rolling up their sleeves. Yeah. What happened? How did that go away?
I have no idea. I was never
Okay.
about it because I'm like, I got pens here and I need them, and that was back then when you had the Velcro patches right here, the Velcro
Yeah.
pockets. Like I had
Mhm.
shit in my pockets. Like I'm not gonna try to roll them all the way up, dude. Like it was just a nuisance for me. But it was also like you could also not roll your sleeves, and that was totally okay. And I was like, I'm just not gonna fucking roll my sleeves. It just
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
spend 20 minutes just to roll them up. Fuck no.
I think it's a big Marine thing, right? Yeah, big Marine thing.
Oh yeah,
They're
yeah.
real proud of
Oh,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
huge
yeah,
Marine thing.
yeah, yeah.
But before we head out, I just got a couple more. Go or no go at the station. The leg tuck.
I go. I can knock out so many of
Fuck
those
yeah.
things. I hate planking.
Yeah, I miss it every
You
day.
see, you see this freaking arm right here? So many leg tucks just right through these muscles. Yeah. God,
Oh,
I was
baby.
sad when that went away.
It was a very depressing day for the Army. I'm not gonna lie to you. It was very depressing. Um, what about heating up your MRE?
I don't judge you for it, but I'm gonna say no go. Just eat it.
Hell yeah.
It sucks. I won't judge you for it if you do it, but it's like, who's got time for that shit?
That's what I'm talking about. What about pretty much service ribbon stickers on the back of windshield?
A no go. OPSEC. Come on, bro.
Hell yeah. Okay, speaking of like getting Army tattoo or tab tattooed on you.
Ooh. So I have several Army tattoos. I actually have.
Oh,
Actually, do you know what this is?
no, I
So for
can't see
all
it
all the
that well.
listeners out there, you would see an arrow with 3 dash marks and a circle on the end. So kind of a funny story. I know I'm diverting from your questions, but
Oh, you're fine.
1 mile from here, when I was in mortar PL, we went to NTC. We came back and it's like I threw out. I was like, man, you know what? Like we're tight. We should. I threw my platoon. I was like, we should get a platoon tattoo. And
Of course, it always starts that way.
and my RTO, who was kind of like the crazy guy in the platoon, he goes, I got a guy. So we went and we show up and it's like, man, this looks like a really sketchy tattoo artist. And we all got 120 millimeter mortar tattoos. And it's so funny. Like a lot of them were getting them on their forearms. They were getting tiny ones. I was like, man, I am Mohawk 6. I am the mortar PL. I'm getting a giant one. And I come back to my house and I was back. This guy, he covered them up after he got done. My other guy who was done some of the other work, he didn't do that. But my wife's like, let me see it. And I show her and she's like, I cannot believe you did that. It's freaking huge. And this is this has been touched up because I don't know what this guy was on, but like the circle was not a complete, it was more like an oval with a bump on it. It was a trash tattoo. And I've gotten a lot of shit about that tattoo ever since then. But it's kind of cool because I know there's like 10 other 11 Charlies running around. We all got a tattoo together.
Running around the Army with the same tattoo.
Well, mine's the biggest, so there you go. But
Yeah.
so I don't judge. I'd say go for Army tattoos. I would say no go for the Ranger Tap tattoo. Yeah.
Okay. That's respectable.
I'd say no go for that. Yeah.
And second to last question, man. What achieve or leave behind as a leader?
I would say, that whoever worked for me or whoever I served with, that I was just really good at taking care of people, no matter what. If they sucked, if they were a shitbag, they were getting kicked out of the Army, or if they were awesome. I would love for people to know that, like John Howell, at the end of the day, he took care of me and my family when I needed it. Yeah. And I have to say, a lot of that's based on a company commander I had later on when I was an HHCXO. One of the biggest things I remember when I had a kid, our first son, he didn't even make me turn in a leave form. He's like, just take your leave.
So just
and
go.
he did not call me during that time. And that was back before all of this paternity leave. I think it was like 10 days.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that. So, yeah, every position, it's like, you got to think about the soldier and their family first before anything when it comes to training or all of that. Because at the end of the day, I've heard this said before, whether it's 20 years, 30 years, or even just, 6, we're all going to leave the Army one day. And guess what? The
Yeah.
Army's going to find someone that replaces us. And I don't think at that point it matters what schools you went to, what patches you wore. What's going to matter is your family still there or not? And I think leaders have a big part to play in that, because if your family's not enjoying that you're, serving, I mean, they're not going to want to continue to serve. And they're definitely going to be like, screw all those officers who mess with my family. So, yeah,
Yeah, I've heard
that
it
would be
before.
my way. That'd be my legacy. So I hope that's what it leaves whenever I decide to hang it up.
Hell yeah, man. And before we head out, just one last question. What do you have to say to those young officers or those young privates out there in the Army right now? Some last words of wisdom, because we have had a boatload of wisdom from you coming in. Inspiring, motivational, resilient. What's one piece of advice that you would give to the young officers and the young Huas out there?
Well, if I was speaking to all of them, I'd definitely say thank you for serving, because I know what you go through to get into the Army now, especially, just the process of when it starts with your recruiter to joining, or as an officer, just doing 4 years of college and navigating your way through that. But I would say the biggest thing, let's see, I would say just because, if you do one contract or you stay in 20 and retire, that makes you special. It doesn't matter if you're in the Guard, Reserves, or active duty. I mean, you signed your name to serve. Some of us stay in, 20, 30 years. I don't know. I really, what my future will hold. I mean, I'd like to make 20. That'd be cool. Because my degree was in physical education, so I really don't want to be a gym coach right now. That's a later line goal. But that makes you special, and we're such a small percentage of the population, that raised their right hand and decided to serve. I think I did it when I was on active duty. I looked down at the other brothers and sisters in arms in the reserves and the National Guard, and so we're one team, one fight is what really matters, and it doesn't matter if you're Guard, Reserves, or active duty. Like, you signed up to serve, and that is honorable. And when people, are trying to force you to re-enlist or, stay in or things like that, like, do what you want to do. Do what's best for you and your family. And sometimes that might mean walking away, but you know what? You did it once, and that sometimes
Yeah.
that's honorable, and that's good. That's good enough, and that's something you can be proud of and hang your hat on. So, yeah, be proud of your service, and as your career goes on, do what you want to do. Don't let anyone try to bully you into making a mistake or doing something you don't want to do. Because if your heart's not in it, you probably shouldn't still be doing it. And if it's something you want to continue to keep doing, do it, man. Like, or girl, or lady, just keep serving. If you don't have the heart for it, maybe it's time to move on to something else, and that's okay. You've done it once.
You've done it once, and that's all that really matters. John, I cannot thank you for spending time with us today, for spending time with us here today. It's been an amazing time. I've had a lot of fun. I'm just going to need you to hold back real quick before we completely head out. But there's nothing else for me to do than to just roll out the red carpet for you and just let people know what you got going on and where to find you.
All right, yeah. You can find me. The best way to communicate is on Instagram. Just slide into my DMs. I'm pretty responsive on those. I will message you back, and also my email is listed in there. It's abu161ax@gmail.com, because it was a company page and I haven't updated it. And probably the second best way to follow is on TikTok, and you can message me there. And then finally, for any of the long form stuff, I am on YouTube as well at Serving the Leaders for all three. So yeah, any of those three. And if you want to contact me, Instagram's the best, and then probably TikTok.
Hell yeah, dude! I'm just gonna need you to hang back real quick. Loved having you here today. Thanks for giving us the time to talk to you, to learn about your story, to hear it, and to learn about you and hear words of wisdom from you, man. It's been absolutely great. I've had so much fun today. I don't know if you have, but I have had a lot of fun here today, man.
Me too, man.
To those listening, if you liked what you hear today, tell somebody about it. Let's spread Servant of Leader's story out there. Let's make sure people listen to it, because he's had a lot of things going on, a lot of resilience, a lot of wisdom, and it's just a great person overall. For me, share it, tell somebody about it, have fun, listen to the story, watch the reels and all that good stuff. But for me, this has been the Wet Boots Podcast, everybody, reminding you that sometimes you have no other choice than to keep going in wet boots. We'll see you next time.